Every year, casinos rake in billions in profits, yet there are particular slot machines they really despise keeping on their gaming floors. Ex-casino staff members have disclosed details about 9 specific high-return slots that offer players notably superior chances. You'll find these machines in virtually every significant casino, and management understands precisely which ones they are. When this video wraps up, you'll recognize the specific titles of these slots and understand why casinos really wish you'd never discover them. Let's dive into the first machine on our list, known as Lucky Larry's Lobster Mania. This IGT staple repeatedly shows up in insider accounts as one of the slots that casino supervisors monitor most intensely. Lucky Larry's Lobster Mania has earned a standing among informed gamblers for regular bonus activations and reliable returns. The lobster trap bonus element is what renders this slot especially compelling from a gambler's viewpoint. Once this bonus activates, which occurs more regularly than numerous contemporary slots, gamblers can collect considerable sums that notably prolong their gaming sessions. Here's an account that excellently demonstrates why casinos loathe this slot. An ex-slot attendant from a prominent Las Vegas establishment described an event from 2019 involving a retired math instructor who visited 3 sessions weekly and exclusively played Lobster Mania. Throughout 6 months, she documented each spin in a journal, wager sizes, bonus occurrences, all details. She ultimately shared her findings with the slot supervisor, demonstrating the machine was delivering 4% above the casino's advertised average. The property couldn't challenge her calculations because they were correct. They provided her complimentary dining and courteously requested she cease sharing her discoveries on a well-known gambling forum where she'd accumulated thousands of readers. She rejected both suggestions and persisted with her analysis, transforming into somewhat of a legend among neighborhood gamblers. What insiders have disclosed about Lobster Mania is that the slot's recognition generates a dilemma for properties. It's recognized enough that gamblers deliberately hunt for it, which indicates casinos can't merely position it in a rear area without annoying their clientele. Nevertheless, former staff reveal that numerous casinos have reacted by decreasing the quantity of Lobster Mania units on their floors or exclusively providing higher stakes versions. Internal records demonstrated that Lobster Mania regularly fell short of establishment expectations, which in gambling terminology indicates it was distributing more than executives desired. The buoy bonus feature specifically has been referenced by previous technicians as an element that can result in substantial victories. One ex-floor supervisor disclosed that during crowded weekend periods, they would observe queues developing at Lobster Mania units, while contemporary stingier slots remained vacant close by. This generated an awkward scenario where the property had to balance customer happiness and earnings. However, hold on until you discover what occurred with our next slot. It triggered even more significant problems for executives. Slot number 2, Mr. Cashman. Aristocrat's Mr. Cashman collection has been recognized by ex-casino personnel as another machine that executives would rather stayed unknown to typical players. What renders Mr. Cashman especially aggravating for properties is how often the bonus activates. The small golden mascot that emerges and grants bonuses, complimentary rounds, or progressive prizes appears more regularly than casino executives expected when these units were initially placed. Yet here's where circumstances turn truly incredible. An ex-casino surveillance specialist disclosed something that transpired at an Atlantic City property in 2017. 5 companions who connected virtually through a slot forum chose to synchronize their gameplay. They would message one another whenever somebody activated the Mr. Cashman bonus, then everyone would gather at the Mr. Cashman cluster of units close by. The mental impact was remarkable. When several units began celebrating simultaneously, it generated an excitement frenzy. Additional gamblers would desert stingier machines to participate in what appeared like a profitable area. The property's surveillance division initially suspected it was some form of advantage gambling or fraud operation. Following weeks of examination, they discovered the gamblers were merely utilizing the machine's authentic high activation rate to counter the property's strategic positioning psychology. Executives were livid. These gamblers weren't violating any regulations, just leveraging the slot's authentic mathematical edge combined with group cooperation. The property ultimately dispersed all Mr. Cashman units throughout separate areas to eliminate this grouping phenomenon. The Mr. Cashman mascot activation is controlled by a random generator pattern that turned out to be more liberal than rival machines from that time frame. Insiders have mentioned that internal property analyses frequently marked Mr. Cashman units as underachieving, particularly during busy periods when several gamblers would be triggering bonuses concurrently. What renders this slot even more compelling is that multiple variations exist with somewhat different aesthetics, yet they all feature that central bonus mechanism. Based on X-Gaming regulatory personnel, this indicated casinos couldn't merely eliminate one variation without gamblers recognizing and inquiring about it. The slot had cultivated an overly devoted fan base. And hold on until you discover what transpired with our next slot, because it includes an event that nearly resulted in a casino penalty. Slot number 3, China Shores. Konami's China Shores has been referenced consistently by ex-casino staff as a slot that produces more regular victories than executives favor. Based on insiders, the action-stacked icons mechanism that characterizes this slot generates more successful arrangements than typical reel setups. The manner icons can emerge stacked on each individual reel indicates that when you land a profitable spin, it can be exceptionally profitable. The slot's moderate variance combined with respectable hit rate makes it particularly hazardous from the property's perspective. It's not an extreme volatility slot where gamblers rapidly deplete their funds, yet it's also not so generous that it's clearly gambler advantageous. This center ground indicates that gamblers can experience enjoyable sessions without landing a significant prize, and they depart experiencing satisfied about the encounter. That satisfaction encourages return visits, which intensifies the property's challenge. Before we proceed to a genuine account about this slot, I'd sincerely value it if you'd subscribe and share in the comments. Have you ever scored big while gambling with your relatives or companions? Now, here's where circumstances become compelling. A significant regional property tried to discreetly modify the configurations on their China Shores units to restrict them without completing appropriate regulatory clearance. One consistent gambler, a programmer who specialized in statistical evaluation, had been recording his sessions in a comprehensive database for beyond a year. He observed his outcomes had shifted drastically during a 14-day window. The bonus rate had declined, and his typical session duration was reduced almost by 50%. He submitted a grievance with the gaming authority, and what transpired next astonished everybody. The probe disclosed that a casino manager had permitted a slot specialist to alter the machine's processor configurations during a night shift utilizing settings that hadn't been cleared by authorities. When the gaming authority's technical division examined the machine's processing board, they discovered proof of the unapproved alterations in the timestamp records. The property received a $250,000 penalty, the manager was discreetly dismissed, and the specialist forfeited his certification. Yet, here's the twist. Following that event, China Shores transformed into absolutely off-limits. No property desired to be discovered tampering with it again, which indicated these units were locked with their initial gambler advantageous calculations, whether executives appreciated it or not. The programmer transformed into somewhat of a myth and continues playing China Shores weekly. Yet, the subsequent slot on this compilation has an even more peculiar background. Slot number 4, Cleopatra 2. IGT's Cleopatra 2 is a follow-up to one of the most profitable slot machines ever manufactured, and based on ex-casino staff, it's a slot that executives have a complex association with. Cleopatra 2 provides superior chances than numerous contemporary video slots, particularly during the complimentary spins bonus feature. The multiplier mechanism that begins at 1 times and escalates with each successive victory during complimentary spins can climb up to 50 times. That magnitude of multiplier capability paired with the capacity to reactivate complementary spins generates possibilities for enormous returns that casino executives observe very cautiously. Here's an account that reveals just how troublesome this slot became. An ex-casino liaison from a tribal property in Oklahoma described an event involving a prosperous, consistent patron who was a retired petroleum executive. This gambler was a 7-figure yearly loser for the property, precisely the variety of patron establishments compete for. Yet he had one peculiarity. He declined to gamble on anything besides Cleopatra 2. Throughout 18 months, his deficits on Cleopatra 2 were insignificant, perhaps $50,000 aggregate, while he was accumulating enormous reward credits based on his gambling volume and wager amount. The property's finance division determined that among his rewards, accommodations, dining, and shows, they were genuinely losing funds on him despite his gambling. Executives conducted a conference to address the Cleopatra challenge. They couldn't eliminate the units without forfeiting this high roller. They couldn't request him to gamble on something different without offending him. One manager genuinely suggested placing manipulated Cleopatra 2 units that appeared identical but featured restricted configurations until the regulatory official highlighted that would be disastrously unlawful and would forfeit them their gaming authorization. Ultimately, they chose to maintain everything unchanged and merely acknowledge this specific gambler as a strategic sacrifice, anticipating his attendance would draw other valuable gamblers. Yet they began monitoring other high-stakes players' machine selections attentively, and anybody else who preferred Cleopatra 2 obtained noticeably reduced generous reward proposals. What renders Cleopatra 2 especially compelling is its extensive availability and title awareness. Unlike obscure units that properties can discreetly eliminate, this slot is so recognized that gamblers request it. Ex-floor supervisors have disclosed that this generates a circumstance where properties feel compelled to maintain at minimum a handful of Cleopatra 2 units on the floor to accommodate patron requests, despite internal records revealing the units distributing more than preferred. Continue viewing, though, because the 5th slot has a trait that renders it even more troublesome for properties. Slot number 5, Top Dollar. IGT's Top Dollar has been recognized by ex-casino personnel as one of the traditional mechanical reel slots that continues providing superior chances than most contemporary video slots. The straightforwardness of Top Dollar's 3-reel configuration masks some remarkably gambler-advantageous calculations. The distribution schedule on Top Dollar, especially at elevated stakes, provides superior long-range returns than elaborate multi-line video slots that require the identical sum per spin. Yet here's an account that exposes just how deceptive properties can be. An ex-slot specialist from a Midwest property shared something that occurred in 2016. Executives wanted to eliminate their final 6 Top Dollar units because they were upkeep headaches. At minimum, that's what they informed the gaming authority. The actual explanation, based on internal correspondence this specialist subsequently observed, was that a cluster of gamblers had been occupying these units during busy periods, and they were overly educated about the advantageous chances. The property claimed they couldn't obtain replacement components anymore, so the units had to be discontinued. Yet, here's what genuinely occurred. The specialist was instructed to intentionally execute inadequate upkeep on these units. He was directed to utilize inferior-grade lubricants that would trigger more regular malfunctions, to postpone fixes by asserting components were on delayed order when they were genuinely accessible, and to maintain these units in a continuous state of nearly malfunctioning. Following 6 months of this handling, the property had records demonstrating these units had been inactive for fixes beyond 40% of the duration, which they showed to authorities as rationale for elimination. The specialist felt horrible about it, but required the employment. Nevertheless, 2 years afterward, when he transferred to a separate property, he anonymously forwarded records to a gambling sector oversight website. The account got covered by a gaming sector newsletter, and while no official probe occurred, the practice became recognized enough that other properties became more cautious. The specialist mentions he continues feeling remorseful about essentially undermining units that gamblers cherished, but he desired people to understand that when properties claim a unit is being eliminated for upkeep explanations, that's not necessarily the complete truth. If you consider that's deceptive, hold on until you discover about the strategies employed with the subsequent slot. Slot number 6, Stinkin' Rich. IGT's Stinkin' Rich is a slot that ex-casino staff characterize as featuring one of the most gambler-advantageous bonus frameworks in contemporary slot architecture. Based on insiders, the Trash for Cash bonus mechanism and the Keys to Riches bonus both provide considerable victory capability with comparatively regular activations. The hit rate of the bonus features on Stinkin' Rich surpassed casino executive projections, resulting in the slot being intensely observed through back-end monitoring networks. Here's an unbelievable account. An ex-floor supervisor from a prominent Las Vegas Strip property disclosed that executives got so annoyed with Stinkin' Rich that they attempted mental tactics. They couldn't eliminate the units because of gambler request, and they couldn't modify the calculations because of rules. Therefore, they became inventive in the most trivial manners conceivable. At this specific property, they situated their stinkin' rich units immediately adjacent to a cluster of penny slots that had been deliberately chosen for featuring the most irritating audio effects on the whole floor. We're discussing units with noisy, repetitive melodies, persistent screaming declarations, and sharp celebration noises that activated every handful of seconds. The floor supervisor confessed they conducted experiments at various times of day, calculating sound levels, deliberately to render the stinkin' rich zone as unpleasant as feasible without breaching noise regulations. Yet it becomes superior or inferior, contingent on your viewpoint. Throughout summer periods, they would intentionally redirect the climate control circulation away from that portion of the floor. Gamblers would genuinely be perspiring while attempting to appreciate their stinkin' rich sessions. One upkeep employee disclosed that they obtained particular directions not to address rapidly to climate grievances in that zone. The brilliance of this approach, from the property's viewpoint, was that it didn't breach any gaming rules. The slot continued functioning flawlessly and distributed according to their cleared calculations. The property merely rendered the encounter miserable enough that gamblers would ultimately surrender and transfer to other stingier units in more pleasant zones. Based on the ex-floor supervisor, the approach partially succeeded. Typical session durations on Stinkin' Rich declined by approximately 30%, yet the property misjudged gambler resolve. Devoted enthusiasts began transporting personal cooling devices, donning lighter garments, and even utilizing sound-blocking headphones. Some gamblers perceived the unpleasant circumstances as a test and wore it as an honor badge that they were resilient enough to tolerate it for the superior chances. That's an amusing account. Share in the comments. Have you ever gambled in a property area where the circumstances weren't particularly favorable? Regardless, we've got 3 additional slots approaching that might astonish you even further. Slot number 7, Triple Diamond. IGT's Triple Diamond embodies the traditional 3-reel slot structure that provides some of the optimal chances you can discover on a property floor. Based on insiders, the straightforwardness of this slot is precisely what renders it beneficial for educated gamblers. The wild multiplier icon that provides the slot its title can multiply victories by 3 times or even 9 times when several wilds emerge. And these multipliers activate regularly enough to render the calculations function in the gambler's benefit compared to most alternative choices. Here's a captivating account that reveals how these units generated their own underground culture. An ex-floor supervisor from Reno shared an observation that required her years to comprehend. She observed that educated neighborhood gamblers had cultivated an implicit protocol around Triple Diamond units. If somebody was gambling on one and departed for a restroom visit, they'd position a coat or a beverage to secure their location, and other consistent players would honor it. Yet it was beyond mere courtesy. There was a genuine network. She ultimately recognized that particular consistent players had arranged a shift timetable. Gambler A would play from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. Gambler B from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. and continuing. They never addressed it overtly where cameras could capture it, yet they had evidently synchronized to guarantee that Triple Diamond units were continuously occupied by educated gamblers during busy periods, successfully preventing tourists and informal gamblers who didn't comprehend the slot's worth. Executives detected this ultimately and conducted a conference about the Triple Diamond Challenge. One manager genuinely proposed employing inactive security personnel to gamble on the units during crowded shifts merely to obstruct the devoted gamblers. The legal division promptly rejected that, indicating the possible responsibility concerns. Alternatively, they attempted relocating the Triple Diamond unit several times, yet the shift cluster would merely adjust within a handful of days. The genuine shock arrived during a remodel, when the property ultimately chose to eliminate the Triple Diamond units completely, asserting the floor area was required for a high-stakes chamber. Something unanticipated occurred. The central cluster of Triple Diamond gamblers, approximately 20 consistent players who collectively invested tens of thousands yearly, merely ceased attending that property. They didn't create a significant disturbance or submit grievances. They merely discreetly transferred their patronage to a rival across town that continued featuring Triple Diamond units. Within 3 months, the property's data division recognized the income decline and traced it back to the remodel choice. They ultimately reinstalled 4 triple diamond units in a small niche near the poker chamber, and most of the gamblers ultimately returned. The event transformed into a case example internally about the concealed worth of problematic units that cultivated gambler devotion. Now, the final 2 units on this compilation utilize a technology that properties genuinely wish they could alter. Slot number 8, Zeus 2. WMS Gaming's Zeus 2 has been recognized as a slot with a distinctive reel setup that functions in the gambler's benefit more than property executives predicted. Zeus 2 utilizes a colossal reel structure with a typical 5x4 reel arrangement on the left and an enormous 5x12 reel arrangement on the right. This setup generates an immense quantity of possible successful arrangements. And based on accounts from ex-slot specialists, the rate of victories throughout both reel arrangements made this slot distribute more reliably than projected. What renders this especially compelling is the complementary spins mechanism. The stacked wild icons that can emerge on both the primary and colossal reel arrangements generate possibilities for extensive screen coverage during the bonus feature. Ex-floor supervisors have disclosed that observing Zeus 2 during complementary spins was frequently aggravating from an executive viewpoint because gamblers could link together several successive significant victories that would notably increase their funds. Here's a remarkable account that reveals how severely one property miscalculated. An ex-gaming director from an East Coast establishment disclosed what occurred during an especially poor month for slot income. Superior executives required an evaluation of all underachieving units, and Zeus 2 was at the summit of the compilation. The units were favored, yet the earnings per area was terrible from the property's perspective. The gaming director suggested a strategy. Transfer all Zeus 2 units to the most distant area of the property near the parking structure entrance, distant from dining establishments, restrooms, and the primary gaming floor. The concept was that exclusively the most committed gamblers would trouble traveling that distance, which would organically decrease play quantity without technically eliminating the units. Executives cleared the strategy promptly, yet here's what transpired next, and nobody anticipated it coming. Within 2 weeks, that distant area transformed into the most crowded portion of the property during evening periods. Information had circulated among the devoted gamblers that all the Zeus 2 units had been combined in one zone, and they began assembling there. Gamblers began labeling it the favorable machines area and the gambler advantageous zone. The zone cultivated its own communal environment. People would queue for units, discuss about approaches, and commemorate each other's bonuses. The unforeseen result was that tourists and informal gamblers began recognizing the crowds and questioning property liaisons what was unique about that zone. Some of them wandered over to examine and uncovered the Zeus 2 units. The property had unintentionally generated a promotional circumstance where they were attracting focus to the precise units they desired people to evade. The clustering of gamblers in one zone also rendered it apparent that these units featured superior chances. Nobody congregates around stingy slots. 3 months afterward, executives had to reverse the choice and disperse the Zeus 2 units throughout the floor again. Yet the damage was completed. Gamblers now understood these units were unique, and the favorable machines area transformed into an internal joke among consistent players. Based on the ex-gaming director and manager genuinely inquired during a conference if they could prohibit gamblers from discussing Zeus 2 virtually until the legal division clarified that would be unfeasible to implement and possibly unlawful. The whole event transformed into a cautionary account within the organization about unexpected results of apparent unit positioning approaches. The ultimate slot has a comparable account. Slot number 9, Kronos. WMS Gaming's Kronos shares some resemblances with Zeus 2. Yet based on ex-casino staff, it possesses its own traits that render property executives uneasy. Kronos utilizes a comparable colossal reels configuration, yet the bonus mechanisms and icon arrangements generate a distinct gambling encounter that numerous seasoned gamblers favor. The complementary spins bonus on Kronos, particularly when it reactivates several times, can result in prolonged bonus features that distribute considerable sums relative to the original wager. What ex-floor supervisors have disclosed about Kronos is that the slot tends to feature powerful gambler devotion, indicating the same people revisit to gamble on it consistently. This variety of devotion is excellent for retaining people in the property, yet troublesome when those devoted gamblers are drawn toward a slot that distributes more than executives desire. Here's the most theatrical account of all, and it flawlessly demonstrates the power conflict between properties and educated gamblers. An ex-property operations supervisor from an establishment in the Southwest shared an event that occurred during a scheduled remodel in 2018. Executives chose to eliminate all Kronos units permanently, utilizing the remodel as disguise. The authorized statement was that the floor area would be utilized for contemporary, more thrilling games that current gamblers favored. Yet, information leaked before the units were eliminated. A consistent gambler who was acquainted with a slot attendant discovered about the strategy and shared about it in a private social media cluster of approximately 200 neighborhood slot enthusiasts. Within 48 hours, something extraordinary occurred. Dozens of gamblers appeared deliberately to gamble on Kronos one final occasion. The property was so crowded that weekend that executives initially believed they were observing the beneficial impacts of their promotional initiative for the remodel. Then somebody in finance calculated the figures. The increase in visitor volume was completely from people arriving to gamble on Kronos. And while the property was crowded, most gamblers were clustered on the units that were about to be eliminated, the ones with the optimal chances. The property was crowded, yet not generating ideal funds because everybody was gambling on the advantageous units. One consistent gambler even arranged a Kronos memorial on the ultimate day before elimination, where a cluster appeared wearing dark garments as a jest. They captured photos with the units and shared them virtually with hashtags about the favorable machines. Executives conducted an urgent conference. They recognized something significant. Eliminating favored units, even ones that didn't produce ideal income, could damage overall visitor volume and generate adverse publicity within the neighborhood gambling community. Gamblers were already discussing how the property was eliminating all the favorable slots and becoming avaricious. Some were overtly addressing transferring to rival establishments. The property made a shocking choice. The Kronos units were discreetly maintained on the floor following the remodel, though relocated to reduced prominent positions. The authorized declaration was that due to widespread request, we're maintaining select favorites. Yet, internal records, the operations supervisor observed afterward, disclosed the genuine determination. The deficit in income from maintaining Kronos was balanced by the enhanced visitor volume and overall expenditure those gamblers produced on alternative services like dining establishments, beverages, and other gambling. The event transformed into a teaching occasion internally, and manager even distributed a memo about the Kronos circumstance, clarifying that occasionally you require strategic sacrifices in commerce, and that pertains to properties too. You can't maximize everything for greatest short-range earnings without contemplating gambler contentment and long-range devotion. The Kronos units transformed into a representation of the conflict between property calculations and patron psychology. Based on the operations supervisor, some properties learned from this event while others dismissed it. Yet the account circulated through sector networks, and now, when significant establishments contemplate eliminating favored units, somebody typically mentions that occasion, a property nearly forfeited its consistent players over Kronos. Here's the essential information that connects everything together. Based on several ex-casino staff throughout separate establishments and territories, property executives sustain comprehensive databases monitoring every slot machine's achievement. These networks observe not merely the RTP, return to player, yet also elements like typical wager amount, session duration, gambler revisit frequency, and income per area of floor space. The units we've addressed today embody more than merely advantageous chances. If you desire to discover more about other slots that properties despise, examine the additional videos on this channel. And don't neglect to like and subscribe for more insider details about how slot machines genuinely operate.